Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 328, and I had a conversation with Julia Verdin. Julia is trying to make this world better through her art and advocacy. Her 30-plus year career includes writer, award-winning director, producer, activist, advocate. Her mission is to raise awareness on social issues through film and encourages filmmakers to think about how their content shapes the world. She's an extraordinary human, teacher, philanthropist, and creator, and I really enjoyed speaking with her. She and I have run into each other at numerous events. We were introduced by John Penny, who has been on this show, and I'm really glad that I got a chance to sit down with her and learn more about her and her work and what she wants to do to make this world a better place to live in for everyone, but most especially for those who are most vulnerable. If you'd like to check out other episodes that are like today's topics, try Jill Rudder, episode 68, Rosanna McGrattan, episode 52, John Fusco, episode 265, and Deb, episode 294. Looking for older episodes of Hey Human but can't find them on your apps that only hold 300 at a time, you can go to blurby.com/heyhuman with Susan Ruth. That's BLUBRRY for the blurby part. There you'll find all the episodes from the very beginning, all 6+ years of episodes. You can also visit heyhumanpodcast.com, and of course they are there. All of them are there. If you want to check the podcast section or the human section, you'll find easy links that will take you to any episode that you desire. In other news, make sure to check out heyhumanpodcast.com, as I mentioned, for links and to learn more about my guests and the show in general. SusanRuth.com to learn more about me. And please follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. Also, check out my new relationships and sex show. It's called Are We There Yet? With sexologist and healthcare practitioner Mara Edelman. It is on YouTube under youtube.com/Are We There Yet podcast show. So definitely check that out. I also have a regular YouTube channel under official Susan Ruth. So really, if you just Google me, you're going to find a gajillion different things to learn about me and the things I do. So definitely check that out if you are interested. Thanks for listening. Be well, help each other out. These are trying times. It's really hot out there. Please, if you see somebody that might need cooling off, a neighbor who maybe doesn't have air conditioning or needs a little extra help carrying groceries up or whatever it is, please reach out a helping hand or help get them out of the heat and into cooler rooms, or take them for coffee or something. Whatever you can do, just stay cool in this intense heat. Drink water if you can. If you know somebody that doesn't have great access to fresh water, help them out. We're all in this together. Stay safe out there. Be love. And thanks for listening. All right, here we go. Julia Verdin, welcome to Hey Human.
Hello, Susan Ruth, and thank you for having me.
There's a lot of hustle and bustle around here.
Well, when you make indie films, there's usually a lot of people. As they say, it takes a village
absolutely
to make a film. So
yeah,
there's always a lot of people over here, and especially with like Artists for Change, the non-profit, we have a lot of volunteers who are always helping.
Director, writer, producer, activist, advocate. You do all sorts of things.
I think the longer you live, the more experiences that you want to have. So the more you train yourself to do different things, or you find yourself doing different things. I started as an actress. Originally I wanted to be a ballet dancer, but I was never able to do point work. So I auditioned for the Royal Ballet School and didn't get in. Mm-hmm. And then decided that after doing a few school plays and really enjoying them, I decided to go into acting. So I went to drama school, had a decent amount of success as an actress. I had a lot of those 7:30 sitcoms in England, a couple of Barbara Cartland period romance films, some fringe theatre, and a lot of like TV shows like Howard's Way. I played the lead girl's best friend. Never the Twain with Donald Sinden, French Fields with Anton Rogers and Julia Mackenzie. I played his assistant with a French accent, and a number of other things, and I really enjoyed it. But I kind of fell into producing by accident when I got offered a job running the development section of a new film company. And I got more and more involved in doing that, and the acting kind of fell to the wayside a little bit, and I became a producer, so it wasn't really planned.
Where did you grow up? Was the family creative?
Yeah, absolutely. My family, originally I was born in Henley-on-Thames, but we then moved to Oxford when I was about 7, so both my parents went to Oxford and were quite literary, and we didn't have a TV in the house until I was about 15, so I grew up reading books and was a total bookworm, and actually very grateful for that now, because it gave me a great kind of literary background, and having a good knowledge of literature means there's an abundance of wonderful material.
It fosters imagination, more so than television, because television's showing you what things look like and how it is played out, and when you are allowed to figure that out on your own through books, I think you get to go further and into the depths of what you think and feel about things.
I think that's a very interesting observation, and I think that's really true. I mean, I used to spend hours as a child in my imagination. And I was wonderfully happy there. I'd come up with all sorts of stories, all sorts of scenarios, and it was kind of joyful.
Siblings?
I have a brother and a sister, and then my father remarried. I also have 2 half sisters and a half brother.
That's a big family.
Yeah, so it went from being a small family to quite a big one.
All right, and Oxford is beautiful.
Oh, it's really beautiful. We also have my father's main business was he was a scientist and a kind of entrepreneur, but his hobby business was he brought this rather beautiful restaurant and boathouse called Cherwell Boathouse, and we lived in the house right behind it. So we lived right on the river. I learned to swim in the River Cherwell, and it was fantastic growing up as a kid. Whenever I was hungry, I could go down to the restaurant and get extra food. There was always a colourful array of people down there working. One of my kind of first jobs as a teenager was running our tea hut, so selling ice cream and soft drinks and cakes. It was rather fun, though. As I got older, I think we probably ate most of the profits because I'd have all my friends over for tea. I think that's when I became very social, and because we had this restaurant and food and drinks, I became rather popular as a result. So a lot of people would want to come and spend time there.
This actually sounds like a British television show. I would watch that show.
Yeah, well, one of my favourite British TV shows, I don't know if you ever saw it, but it's very, very funny, was Fawlty Towers.
Oh, absolutely. I started school, my dad taught at Cambridge, so I started school in England, so we would watch, Monty Python, Fawlty Towers, Are You Being Served, Red Dwarf, all these great shows. So funny.
Yeah, there's nothing like British comedy. Mm-hmm. It really is the best. And actually we had this wonderful gentleman who used to run the restaurant, who was almost like a character from Fawlty Towers, because he was very blunt with people. Like, guests would arrive early and he'd be there. He was very tall and would be wearing tennis shorts and a straw hat. And his girlfriend was the cook. And customers would arrive a little too early, and he would literally go to them, "What are you doing here? Go away, we're not ready, shoo, shoo." but they would love it. Yeah, he was a total Basil, but customers would love it, and they would come back for this experience. Every now and again, when they'd have a lover's spat, sometimes you'd have to duck to avoid a chicken being thrown across the restaurant. But as I said, it was a lot of colourful characters, and it was really fun.
Hello, little one. There's dogs running through the hallway. Just FYI for those of you listening.
I love dogs.
Me too.
I'm a great proponent for rescuing dogs.
Yes, big fan myself.
Yeah.
Love the furries. Not to be confused with furries. They have their place in the world as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When did you start getting an inkling that you wanted to go into the creative arts full time?
I think, kind of right when I finished drama school. I went kind of right in. I got my first, I booked my first job pretty quickly, and I was fairly busy as an actress for quite a while, and then I got more and more busy in producing.
And you knew that was the path?
Yeah, I realised I was really good at that, and I'm just not good at sitting around waiting for the phone to ring, or kind of saying to people, "Can I be in your movie?" I prefer creating and making opportunities, and I found that one of the things I loved about acting was developing characters. But I found that in working with writers as a producer, or coming up with concepts for material, and now that I've eventually evolved into directing and writing as well as producing. As a writer, I love creating characters and kind of thinking of the complexity of personality. It's really fun, and so I kind of get what I loved about acting.
How did directing inform your acting? How did your writing inform your directing? And how did producing inform all of those things?
Well, having had an acting training is really helpful for directing, because I think one of my strengths as a director, and something I've often been complimented on, is my ability to get great performances out of young and usually relatively inexperienced actors. And a lot of that is thanks to my acting training, because having been there myself, I know what it feels like to put yourself out there and be vulnerable and expose your feelings. And I also understand how to give actors direction in a form that they can comprehend. Because if you tell an actress to be more sexy, they don't know what to do with that. But yet, if you say, go into that scene with the intention of seducing that person, they know what to do with that, or to manipulate, or to whatever it is. I worked with a wonderful director's coach called Judith Weston, and she stresses always using active verbs to give directors action, and I think it's invaluable advice. If you just say to an actor, you need to be more scary, they're at a loss. They don't know what to do. But if you give them a specific way of being more scary, then it's so much easier, and they can kind of get their head around it. And I also think kind of gentle encouragement. I've worked with many directors over the years as a producer, and sometimes seen people kind of scream at the actors, and the actors almost kind of, their performances go worse because they get more and more nervous. I think to kind of coax a performance out of someone is a much more effective way of getting what you need.
Do you find as a female director that you, forging your way in your path, that also opened up your eyes in a way to some of the other things that are going on in the industry, which is why you make such an effort to create films that say something and that do something and that facilitate people to be in their core being and the way they live their lives?
I think it's been amazing, the strides that we've made in now being conscious of how women are treated on set, and as actors, both in terms of writers thinking a little bit more about how they write female roles, So they're not just the attractive, busty blonde, right? But really really doing a good push for diversity and giving, you know, women characteristics, right? And character rather than just kind of physical attributes, which was
hot wife.
Yeah,
right.
often the way those roles were written in the past, and then on set being kind of more having closed sets, now doing nudity riders, making sure everyone's signed off on exactly how a scene's going to be. On a lot of the films that I've directed, there's been no nudity because I haven't found a need for that, and I do not think gratuitous nudity is necessary. I'm a great believer in storytelling. You know, I think if it's necessary for a scene, that's one thing, but I think in many cases, in many instances, it often isn't, and the story could be told in just as powerful a way without it. And it's about the culture that we want to create, right? Because we want to create a culture, you know, I certainly do, where women are respected. And I think, you know, anyone who's seen my films or knows a little bit about me knows that I'm very passionately against abuse to children and minors, and I've done a lot of like work in the trafficking awareness space and foster youth and runaway kids who often have been mistreated and often like sexually abused, and it's really like not right. And a lot of it often it's to do with the media and what we make like feel that it's sort of acceptable, as it were. So if we're putting out images of women as sex objects in advertising and in film and in other, it almost kind of encourages a culture that treats them like that. And for me as a woman, I think it's important to get away from that culture. And I would like to kind of create an environment for, you know, the younger women coming up behind me where they are respected and taken seriously as people, not as objects.
Do you feel that voice is being heard when we have an industry, same with the music industry, entertainments, let's just say across the board, that makes its living on sex and violence?
I think we've still got a way to go, but there have definitely been a lot of improvements. You know, certainly people are less afraid to speak up and encourage that it's okay to speak up and know that they will get support. Whereas I think, you know, 10 years ago, it was very, you know, you wouldn't think about speaking up. You very much had to kind of, if anything ever happened, you've got to kind of keep it quiet.
How do you then turn to the young people that are coming up in the field and allow them to know that they have a voice to say no, or even to not utilize sex as a tool, I guess, for lack of a better word, you know?
I think it's education, you know, and I think it's, for me as a filmmaker, I would love to change the world, but I can only do what I can, and what I can do is try and create an example with the type of films that I make. And I teach a lot and do a lot of work encouraging other filmmakers to think about making social impact content and use their voices for good, and hopefully get through just a little bit.
Yeah. How did Artists for Change come about?
The Artists for Change actually came about after I was asked to show a short film that I did on trafficking at a World Bank event. And
Lost Girls?
Yes. And there were people from non-profits from all over the world. And we showed them the film, and then I gave a talk about how they could use the same sort of principles and steps that I'd done with this film to raise awareness on an agricultural issue or food shortage or another social impact issue. Mm-hmm. And in talking to everybody afterwards, I realised two things. None of the people from any of the non-profits I spoke to had anyone involved in the organisation who had any storytelling or media skills to actually create something that would be an impactful story, and also no budget to create media. A lot of the grants and the funding that they had were all had to be used for services, for providing services, and so had kind of restrictions on how they were used. So I saw the gap in the marketplace, and I believe very passionately that film is one of the most powerful tools to educate and make change. You know, if you look at a film like Blood Diamond, for example, that totally changed the way that people brought diamonds. And also because of the furor that film created and the conversations it started.
That movie gave me a visceral pain.
Yeah.
Watching that film was very intense. And I think you're absolutely right. I think it totally changed the narrative around the diamond industry and what was acceptable.
Exactly. And a lot of the diamond companies, as a result, changed their policies. And the general public now, if someone's going to buy a diamond, usually most people will actively look for a conflict-free diamond. And nobody wants blood diamond anymore. And so that kind of like forced the diamond companies to change their policies and how they operated, because they knew that buyers were taking that into consideration.
I always think about too, so people are forced into these labor intensive, brutal conditions and abused horrifically if they don't produce what is necessary. I'm using the diamonds as a specific example because we were talking about it. Are there programs in place then, not necessarily from Artists for Change, but in general through the UN or UNICEF or anybody that then goes in and helps provide financial stability to these families that almost like force their children to go do this stuff, force them into these situations because they have to support the families?
There are a lot of different organizations out there doing different things, and I know very consciously doing what they can to make change. One of the things that we do with the films that we make is we also create little educational documentaries to go with them. So the idea is you engage with narrative and get people interested in an issue. So for example, when people watch the film about Angie Lost Girls, the film that we did about child trafficking, that was the feature, and then there's Lost Girls, the short film. They're two very different stories, but it'll often get teenagers interested in knowing more about it. Then we have follow-up. We have an educational little documentary EPK piece with various experts talking about the issue, actors talking about the roles and how they were affected by it. We also create presentations, so a teacher can show the film to a class and then have some like talking points referring to various pieces of the film that they can do, and that has worked out very well.
I think it was a powerful message that I think when people think about human trafficking, they think there's a big bad man with a big fat mustache in the back of a white van with no windows that's just nabbing people off the streets. But the reality is, as you showed, that it might be a peer that actually gets them into a situation that then compromises their safety. I thought that was a really important message to get out there, because we all are looking for the boogeyman.
Yeah.
But the boogeyman doesn't really exist. These are human beings who take all shapes and sizes.
And the scary thing is often, the traffickers look very normal. They look like normal, regular people. If you Google traffickers and look at some of the traffickers that have been arrested, you'll find there was one that was a Chinese grandmother. There was another that looked like a regular housewife. There was, a variety of different ethnicities and types. Very often, as I showed in Angie Lost Girls, they will use a young recruiter, somebody close to, their target's age. So often it'll be somebody like, 18 to 20, good looking, can be a girl, can be a guy. When it's a guy, they're called the Romeo recruiters, because they will kind of befriend you, get to know you, court you, sweep you off your feet. And before you know what's happened, they do what's called grooming. They will slowly alienate you from your family, your friends, and then get you to go off somewhere with them. And then you're stuck. And then what they'll do, they'll often like blackmail with pictures or video. They will often demoralize the girls, so they don't believe that they can go home, because now they've been demoralized to such a point where they're so full of shame. They've been abused. They don't have the strength to pick themselves up and leave. They think they're just kind of used dirty goods. It is really like, it's just heartbreaking when you hear some of the stories. They'll often deprive them of sleep, of food,
keep them drugged,
and
threaten their
sometimes
families.
They'll give them drugs to kind of keep them under control, and then they'll get them hooked, and then it's almost like they've become ghosts. So they're not really conscious anymore, and everything just turns into a blur for them. It's really tragic, and that's why, to me, is if somebody is lucky enough to escape from trafficking or be rescued, it is a long road to rehabilitation. And it costs the government a lot of money to rehabilitate survivors of trafficking and catch them up on education mix, to give them, train them up for job skills, the therapy that they need to recover from the trauma. It's a lot. Medical attention. Yeah, it's very expensive.
So much was said. I don't want to give away the film because I want people to watch it, but so much, there was one scene when she's walking out of the shower, and so much was said by how she was walking. And I just, that just like, oh God, how do you recover from that? How do you recover from stuff like that?
It is really tough.
What a nightmare.
And it requires a lot of support and costs the government a lot of money. So that, I think, to me, the more we can educate teenagers what trafficking looks like, and educate young men what trafficking is and that it's not acceptable, because it's reprogramming our future buyers, right? There's however hard we try, it's probably going to be more of a challenge to rehabilitate men who are already purchasing underage girls from sex. But we can educate the next generation. It's very important getting young men to see the film and understand that these girls are not there out of choice, and learn that this is not the way to treat women, and if they see a situation where that's going on, to call and report it. And also for teenagers to recognize it, because if they see the signs of one of their friends being groomed, they're probably the most likely people to see it and recognize it. So the more aware they are, the more chance of that teenager then saying to a teacher or someone in authority, I'm worried about so-and-so, I think she could be being trafficked. Could save that girl's life.
Absolutely. Are most of your fundraising efforts geared toward trafficking, or is it split amongst a lot of different causes at this point?
Right now, because it's an area that I've done a lot of research on, we've been doing a lot to raise awareness on child trafficking, and I feel like we've been making good inroads in that area. I'm actually about to do another project in January, which is a homeless story about a group of people who, not by choice, have ended up on the streets and end up bonding together and forming a dysfunctional family to survive. And it's a story of hope and resilience, because I like to make films that, even though they're about dark topics, have an element of hope.
Yes.
an inspiration to them, because I think that's important, and I think you also have to make content palatable for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually in Angie, Lost Girls, as well as the trafficking story, the film also goes into her recovery journey. And one of the things that I noticed in talking to a lot of survivors is the way that they found their way back was through refinding their faith again, and church groups do a lot to help and support survivors of trafficking, and that seemed to me to be a very important component in recovery. So it shows how not just Angie but also her family have to refine their faith again, because it's a hard thing to get over, and a teenager getting trafficked not only affects the teen but also affects the whole family unit. Because imagine the horror as a parent of going through that. It's just heartbreaking. I don't have children myself, but my brother does, and my sister does, and I've got friends with young kids, and I do a lot of work with runaway kids, and you see these sweet little innocent faces. The thought of something horrific happening to them it just breaks my heart.
Yeah, and unfortunately a lot of runaways get trafficked or turn to sex work as a means of survival.
Oh, it's tragic, Susan. I mean, I've met like 14, 15-year-old kids who've run away from home, and often they've been like rescued by volunteers working for one of the non-profits and taken into shelters. Mm-hmm. The stories of what they've been through are just heartbreaking, and you can see the level of trauma written all over those little faces. Mm-hmm. And it's just no 14 or 15-year-old should have to go through that type of abuse. I mean, they really shouldn't. And a really shocking figure that I heard from one of the trafficking detectives is that the average age of teens trafficked now is 12 years old. Mm-hmm. When I think of my little niece when she was 12,
it's horrifying.
Oh, it's just.
And the thing is there are people out there that are the consumers of this. And as long as there's consumers of this, it's going to be an uphill
You're
battle.
Absolutely right, Susan. It's to me the answer in solving this problem. It's cutting off the demand, because unfortunately trafficking today is $1 billion business.
Multi-billion. It's crazy.
And that is why numbers have been going up. It's happening all across America. People often have this perception that trafficking is this third world problem and not happening here.
One of the biggest hubs is in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh yeah. It is happening all over America, right on our back doorsteps. If you look, you read the news reports. Even here in LA, you'll see 2 teenagers rescued in Pasadena, a teenager rescued in Malibu. It's happening everywhere, and it generally the biggest proponent of teens trafficked are from the foster youth and runaways, but there are also regular middle class children that are being trafficked today. Sometimes people from very rich families can be just as vulnerable, because as I remember, one of the trafficking detectives told me, he said, the problem is, Julia, is that these kids are looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah.
One of the common denominators that I've noticed with a lot of the teens that have been trafficked is no father figure in their life, or non-present parents. So I whenever I've spoken on panels or events, I've always just tried to, parents say, what can we do? I say that the best thing that you can do is really be present for your children and build trust. So if they are approached by a stranger online or in person and it just seems a little odd, they're likely to tell you and come to you, because unfortunately nowadays you don't just have to worry about who your child is going to beat out and about. You also have to worry about online predators. And that is a huge issue. Our youth are going into these chat rooms and all these different places. You really need to monitor your teen social media a little today.
Yeah, I interviewed a guy a little while back, and he poses as young girls online and then goes and meets them and then arranges for the police and all that. And during our interview, he had his phones out that were the phones that are the ones he uses to communicate with these people. They non-stop were going off. Non-stop. Constantly being reached out to from men who thought they were talking to a 13-year-old girl.
Oh,
it was ding, 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 ding. It was crazy.
When I talk to people about trafficking, they often think and what a problem it is, they'll often think I'm exaggerating. But when people start to dig and really look at some of the research and some of the numbers and start reading the news reports, it becomes very clear how prevalent this problem is.
And you bring up a great point, the fact that I think a lot of parents want to believe that their children are safe because they are in an environment that looks like the environment that keeps people safe, but it's not the reality.
Yeah, that's why I think trust is really important, and encouraging your teen to see these films. You know, we've had a lot of wonderful calls and notes from parents who watched the film with their teenage daughter and have told me that it's been an incredibly bonding experience for them, because finally the daughter understood why check-in calls were necessary, why her mum and dad wanted to know where she was all the time, and just got a little bit more understanding about why parents sort of kind of hover over their teens and worry about their whereabouts and want the check-in, because anything can happen.
And as you said earlier, the responsibility of friends being there for other friends, and that includes, and maybe more especially, male friends. Be eyes and ears, because maybe they have an advantage that women don't necessarily, or young girls don't necessarily have.
And that is one of my goals with the films that we're making, Lost Girls, and now Angie Lost Girls, and we'll soon have Maya, our next one coming out, is that the more people that see these films, the more people are going to have their eyes open and aware of what to look for and what the signs are, because the more hotel staff understand what trafficking looks like, if they see something going on in a hotel room or something that doesn't look right, or an older guy coming into a hotel with a much younger girl, the more likely they are to report it. Same
Flight
with the
attendants.
airline staff.
Yeah.
There's been cases recently. They've done some training of flight attendants lately, which has been fantastic. And there was a flight attendant that saved a girl relatively recently. Teachers, I think it's really important for teachers to get an understanding, and parents too. So the more we can, my hope is that we really get our films visible.
Yeah.
And we've also been encouraging other teens to take a copy of the film and do a screening for their friends, and talk to them about it. So the more they get circulated and the more kind of awareness and the more people talk about this, the better chance we have of stopping it.
Yeah, let's hope the tides will turn.
Fingers crossed, cutting off the demand, because if there's no demand, there's no need for supply. To me that is really, really, really key, and it's about the re-education of men. And also, I think a big issue is really encouraging fathers in particular to be present for their families, and also to keep an eye out for the kids in the community that don't have a present father. I'm a great believer in mentorship. And I think, one thing that we need to do as communities is keep our eye out for those vulnerable children that need a kind of mentor figure in their life, or someone that they trust and will talk to if something's not right.
Yeah. And for parents to see if there are friends of your kids that are more vulnerable or not being cared for maybe in the best way. Throw some extra sandwich making stuff in the fridge and be okay with the fact that after school maybe the kids come to your house and make sandwiches. It might be the only meal they get.
Yeah. I think human kindness, and for those of us that are lucky to be generous and share the abundance that we have, is really important today, because there's so many people around who are struggling. It's a tough time.
Yeah, it is. You just wrapped a film. Which one is it?
So the film I just wrapped is called Maya. Very, very excited about it. It's with Patricia Velasquez and Ruma Willis and the wonderful Gianfranco Rodriguez, he played Ewan McGregor's boyfriend in Holston, if you happen to see that, and a fantastic up-and-coming, relatively new actress called Isabella Feliciano, who was, oh my God, her performance is heartbreaking. She is so good. And Billy Budnett, she plays Ray, the kind of like bad guy, as it were, is also really good. It's like a young James Dean. And this film it's about alcoholism, domestic abuse, and also trafficking, but it's also about this cycle of abuse. At the core, it's a mother-daughter story, and how the daughter, who's kind of grown up in a household where her mum's being abused by ne'er to good men, and she falls into that same trap herself. So when the mother loses her daughter, it's finally what propels her to make change, and she gets sober, gets her life back together, and is determined, no matter what, to find her daughter. It's a cycle about mother and daughter learning from each other and getting through the complexities of life together. So it's a very powerful, strong story. I'm really excited for people to see it.
When can they see it?
Hopefully January. Or early, or in the spring next year. We have Lost Girls, the short film, is available now on Amazon and iTunes and a number of other platforms. Angie Lost Girls is also available on Amazon, iTunes, DirecTV. It's also on Lifetime under The Lost Girls. And I hope people spread the word and see them. And then next up is No Address, a story about homeless.
Wow, that's great. I think it's wonderful. Can you tell people how they might find you and maybe donate to some of these causes and help keep this creative content going?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. People can find me at Julia Verdin on social media, or at artists 4 change LA. And you can find our website, artists 4 change.org, online, and always grateful for all those that support us and help us continue to use film to make change.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on the show. And I will put all those links on the links page on heyhumanpodcast.com to make it easy for people to find stuff. Thank you for listening, everyone. And if you see something, say something. You might save a life. You never know. Thank you. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Rate, review, follow, and subscribe to the Hey Human podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.